Are you thinking of traveling to Greece in 2024? Well, I just got back from a 2-week trip to Athens, Mykonos, Santorini, and Rhodes, Greece, and I had an amazing time. And in this video, I want to go through my general travel tips for going to Greece in 2024. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. My name is Alex, and if this is your first time on the channel, my channel is all about pretty much traveling, fitness, lifestyle, and all that good stuff. Over the last few years, I've been to 30 countries, so I'd like to think I have a decent idea of what makes a country enjoyable and not. So again, in this video, I want to go through my experience and travel tips for traveling to Greece in 2024. So right out the hop, I did just want to say objectively, I had an incredible time in Greece. I think the food, the people, the weather, the nightlife, the lifestyle of general in living in these cities was absolutely amazing. As someone who's never been to Greece before, I didn't know really what to expect. I've had some friends who lived in Athens and Crete, so I had a bit of a recommendation from them, but at the same time, going into a new country for the first time, you really don't know until you get there. All right, first things first, let's talk about the destinations. So I spent a week in Athens. I'm typically like a bohemian lifestyle type of person where I like to stay in the major cities as they tend to have the most options for food, for drink, for lifestyle, for fitness, which is also a big part of my sort of day-to-day life. So I like to have the options of being in a major city that gives me the flexibility to do things throughout the day, do things throughout the night, and kind of be on my own schedule. Now, with that being said, it is worth mentioning the Greek culture and lifestyle is a little bit later in the day, similar to something like Spain or Argentina, where generally people are waking up around like, let's say 9 or 10. Typically breakfast isn't a big ordeal. There's like an expression in Greece where the breakfast is literally coffee and cigarette. They have something what's called Freddo espresso, which is like an iced coffee, but they basically use like an ice cream machine blender behind the bar. Every single bar in Greece, if they have a coffee maker, has this little machine, and you order a Freddo espresso, and basically they blend the espresso shot and it becomes like this really frothy sort of foamy drink. It's actually delicious. Then they pour it over ice and put it in kind of like an iced coffee cup with a straw. Very common. As you're walking around, you'll see people drinking this absolutely everywhere, on patios, at work, walking down the street. It is super, super popular, similar to like espresso in Italy, let's say. Now, with that being said, that's typically breakfast until like, 12 to 2. You can get things like a croissant to go, is very, very popular. They also have these kind of spinach pies, which are really popular in the morning, called spanakoppides. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong, but they're super popular. You'll see them again, like all over in these cafes. Really, really normal sort of breakfast for people to have. But generally that's kind of it until later in the day when you get into lunch around like 2 to 5, let's say. Now at that time, it becomes a little bit more standard things like maybe a souvlaki, a gyro, a Greek salad, things like that. But generally it's a little bit lighter, and their biggest meal tends to be later in the night. Generally like 8 to 10 o'clock is pretty standard from what I saw to have dinner. So during the day, options may be a little bit limited. Some places do close between that lunch and dinner window, or are just not open until dinner in general. Something else worth mentioning, if you are someone who likes to go to the gym, we could barely find a gym that opens before 7 o'clock. We ended up finding this one called Holmes Place, which was 30 euro a day for a day pass. Super bougie gym with an indoor pool in Athens. It was obviously very, very nice, but even it only opened, I think, at 6:30 in the morning, which if you're from North America is pretty late in the day. Most gyms here do open at like 5 a.m. or so. I understand there's differences between the cultures, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Now, the cities themselves, food is pretty standard. Greek salads are available, obviously pretty common throughout the country, as it is a Greek staple. Now, it's pretty different from what you'll get in North America. Again, they don't use lettuce at all. It's predominantly tomatoes, onions, cucumbers with feta cheese. Sometimes they put like what's called a rask on the bottom, which is a piece of double baked bread, which kind of like a big crouton if you think of it that way, that then the Greek salad on top kind of soaks into it with the olive oil. Super delicious and super, honestly, like refreshing. Like the tomatoes in Greece tasted almost sweet, like a big strawberry. It's hard to explain until you've had them over there, but they're just so different than any other tomato I've had. And again, I was really surprised with how good the food was. And like, you know, to be honest, I've had amazing meals in places like Paris or Amsterdam or London, but I had to go to specific restaurants to get it. Maybe Paris is known for having good food kind of everywhere, but Greece as a country, every single place we went was fairly good. Obviously some were better than others, but at the same time, we didn't have to dig sort of high and low to find something that was gonna be delicious. Everything really hit the spot. Now let's talk about the people. They are generally really friendly towards tourists. My understanding of it is that if you are like an English speaker or a foreigner, they are gonna be pretty nice to you. I guess there is a little bit less friendliness between the Greek locals, the way I understand it, and the locals we met. But at the same time, as a foreigner being there, it was, you know, very refreshing to be welcomed so openly into restaurants, and they were not very judgmental of trying to learn some Greek while I was there. They were very hospitable and welcoming, and it just felt like a good vibe around the city. Athens specifically, I would say it's safe. It kind of has like an edgy griminess to it. Again, it's hard to explain unless you've been there, but there's basically graffiti all over the city. So it kind of gives it like, I'd like to think of it as a city with a tattoo on it. It gives it a lot of character, a lot of dimensions to it. I guess it has a lot to do with the economy over there currently and over the last few years, which like the rest of the world, I'm sure you've seen no matter where you're from, is a little bit of economic turmoil basically everywhere. So, you know, Greece was no exception to that. Outside of Athens, some of the other cities, obviously Mykonos and Santorini are super popular for tourist destinations. I would say Santorini overall I enjoyed more than Mykonos. I think the people were a little bit friendlier. It wasn't as touristy, it felt like. We did kind of trek most of the island while we were there. And it has obviously a lot of like beauty to it throughout. We were able to go see some churches and go to like Ia and go down to like Amouti Bay Fish. We went to like the Amouti Bay Fish restaurant, which is super famous on like TikTok and Instagram, which was expensive, but honestly well worth it. That hike down to Amouti Bay is pretty crazy though. So we ended up taking a water taxi back from Amouti Bay towards the cable cars. We were meeting up in the sort of old harbor of Santorini. But it was like a beautiful walk down. I'm not sure I would like to hike it back up. It is quite an intimidating walk. Outside of that, I guess we'll talk about Mykonos a little bit. It was obviously, you know, super well known for being a party destination. There's places like Scorpios, which is one of the most expensive restaurants or beach clubs in all of Greece, I would say. It's pretty well known like on Instagram, and they have like a helipad that people fly into just to go to Scorpios. And you know, it's a cool place. We didn't end up going there, but I had some friends that I had met who did, and they said it was, you know, it was cool, but like just ultra douchey. So I mean, if that's your scene, go for it. Personally, I like a little bit more authentic touches. I will say though, we went to a place called 180 Sunset Bar, and I would go back to Mykonos just for this view. This was one of the most beautiful bars I've ever been to in my entire life. It's only open from 6:30 p.m. until 10 p.m. And the way I understand it, during the high season, reservations take like 2 to 3 months to get in advance. But I would literally recommend this place for anyone who's going to Mykonos. This was one of the most incredible sunsets I've ever seen. During sunset, they turned this like this playlist up that just really emphasizes the sunset. Everyone just like focuses on it. There was 3 proposals while we were there, which made for an interesting evening of like cheers and dancing and a lot of champagne. But it was truly a beautiful experience to be there during sunset. And again, if you're going to Mykonos, I would recommend it through and through. In terms of the Mykonos town, pretty well known again for having its nightlife be like, I guess like world class, let's say. In my opinion, I think it was a little bit more chaotic than anything. I was only there in May, which isn't even typically the high season yet, and there is just chaos through these streets. So many people, and all the bars kind of just spill together, and it's hard to find one place to go into. We had some friends recommend Scandinavia in the Mykonos town as one of the bars to go to, but truthfully, it was just a lot. You know, I would say like if you're going there for, let's say like a romantic trip, like a honeymoon, or again, like you're going there to propose, the old town the Mykonos town was pretty chaotic. I'm not sure it would be the most romantic place to go. The rest of the island was beautiful. We ended up doing a hike through sort of the foothills, and we saw a few churches, and we went down to this beach, which was a much more like serene and quiet area of the island. But then what else Mykonos is known for is the beach clubs, like I was hinting at with Scorpios. There's also a number of different ones like Paradise, Super Paradise Beach Club. And again, check these out on like Instagram or Google reviews to see which is kind of your vibe. But we ended up going to Super Paradise and then going kind of down the beach to a place called Talas, which I think was pretty good. It was a little bit cheaper than Super Paradise. It was asking for like 120 euros just for one lounger. And also on that point, I think it's also super important to understand how welcoming people were when you learn the language. One of the friends I was traveling with, she has been in Athens for like 2 months and now she's in Crete for a month. And she had put a lot of effort into learning some of the language. And even as someone like me who's spent almost 3 years learning Spanish now, even when I do have like semi-decent conversations, it's not like it's not appreciated, but not the same way Greek was. So for instance, like to say hello, it's yasso. I'll have the captions here on the screen. And again, my Greek is not that good, so don't judge me too hard. Goodbye is adiosas or antiosas. Kind of sounds like adios in Spanish when they say it, and they kind of have it's an interesting accent, the Greek language, but even learning like these 7 words I'm gonna say right now just made a huge difference. Thank you very much, Efaristo Poli. That one, whenever we would say it, it would actually get a pretty good reaction out of the people we said it to, so that's something I would try and learn. Thank you very much, Efaristo Poli. Additional greetings, Calimera is kind of like buen dia in Spanish, Calimera. It means like good day, good morning. So generally I heard it like before noon or in the morning, people saying Calimera. And then sort of midday evening, it would switch to Calispera, which is kind of like, again, like buenas tardes, let's say in Spanish, or like good afternoon, good evening in English. Then of course, you gotta learn cheers, llamas. And finally the Greek word malaka, which anyone who's been to Greece or speaks Greek, it means like dumbass or asshole, but the way they refer to each other with Malaka is kind of like way in Mexico. It's like dude or friend, like you'll hear them say it amongst each other all the time. Every time we would say it, like Llamas Malacas, like in front of servers or locals, we got a pretty good kick out of it. So I would say learning it is worthwhile, but just be careful when you're saying it. Like don't just go up to strangers saying Malaka Malaka. Additionally, like thinking about how to actually access food and drink, pretty much everywhere we were across the country, they accepted credit cards. It was not hard at all to pay with credit in pretty much any scenario. I wasn't sure, so I did end up bringing some euros as just to be safe. Again, my first time in Greece, but I will say it was really, really easy to do that. Sometimes for like tours, we had to pay cash when we were on this organic vineyard, and they only accepted cash for the tour. But other than that, credit card was super, super widely used. On that same organic farm, we ended up having lunch, and their credit card system did go down. So thankfully, we did have some euros to pay for it. But at the same time, just always keep a little bit of cash on hand in case of emergencies, if you need a cab or something like that. Finally, I did want to mention the airport leaving Athens. This was, if you check in for your flight, it will say, please leave at least 4 hours beforehand. And we were looking at that like, there's no way it's gonna take 4 hours. It will take close to 4 hours to go through this airport. Do not underestimate how long it will take. This is probably the slowest airport experience I've ever had of the 50 plus I've been to over the last few years. There's very little automation. Like typically you can go to a kiosk, do your passport number or check in for your flight and get your bag tags, put it on your bag, and then usually you just drop it off on a conveyor belt. I've done that in places like Peru, Colombia, Argentina. But for some reason, this Athens airport has almost no technology or automation in it. I'm not sure if that's like a budgetary thing or not, but you have to wait in a line to check in. I was checking in for an Air Canada flight that had 700 people on it, or 600 people. Anyways, a lot of people. Right beside another Air Canada flight that was just as big. One was going to Toronto, one was going to Montreal, 30 minutes apart. And then in the middle of that was an American Airlines flight with 500 people in it. And this section of the airport was absolutely chaotic. I've never seen an airport with this many people. There were just delays after delays after delays. And then finally we get past security, massive line for security, massive line for the passports. Like this airport takes time. So do give yourself a healthy buffer when you do get to the airport. But overall, Greece was amazing. I absolutely loved my time there. I would highly, highly recommend it. It wasn't as expensive as some of the other countries like, let's say, maybe Spain or Italy. Actually, I would say on par with something like Croatia nowadays. I lived in Croatia for a little bit and it definitely was not as cheap as I would have expected. So I would say Greece in like the average place, average restaurant, right on par with something like Croatia. But that's pretty much going to be the video. Hopefully this was useful if you are considering traveling to Greece in 2024. If it was, feel free to leave a like or comment in the section below. Always helps the algorithm. As always, my name's Alex. Welcome back to Lifting Nomad. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.